do I move in? Kurt had read all about the school's housing in the pamphlet he ended up reading during the truly awkward 1.5-hour ride to Westerville with his father on this first day of school. As far as background went, it seemed as though all the dormitories were desirable and extravagant, by ordinary standards, as the majority of Dalton's elite student body resided in them. As it stood, Windsor House was by far the most desirable, with a great deal of accomplished alumni graduating from it, and all but being hand-delivered to Ivy League schools. That was how it looked from the black and white. When Blaine, Wes, and David brought Kurt to Windsor for the first time, the massive manor-style building with ancient columns could have put some of the nation's best collegiate fraternity houses to shame. It looked as though it would live up to everything it had been acclaimed to be. And it did, in one way or another. "You all live here?" Kurt asked, watching some boys go into the dormitories. Inside, past the oak doors, a vaulted entrance hall greeted them. The floor was marble, and across the great wooden beams overhead that broke the sunlight, a massive, drop-down banner in deep royal blue, cut through with a golden wire. Windsor's colours. The architecture was exquisite, from the rich tints of the wood to the elegant hues of the walls and the tasteful decor. Windsor might as well have been an exhibit at a museum depicting old-world elegance. "Yeah, well, Wes used to be in Hanover," Blaine smiled. "Really?" asked Kurt, following the others down the hall. "Why did you switch?" "It was more exciting here." "All right, I might be starting to get a little nervous," Kurt said, frowning at them. Blaine laughed and put his arm around his shoulders. While Kurt tried to restrain his heart from flying out of his chest at this sudden action, Blaine tried to exude feigned coolness. "Okay, look, those things we talked about with Howard. They're extreme cases. The boys here are rational, mostly. Don't worry, we wouldn't actually put you in danger." Something upstairs exploded, making Kurt jump. Everyone in the hall barely batted an eye. Without so much as breaking his stride, Wes pulled out a fire extinguisher standing nearby, and handed it to a boy who seemed to have arrived in the hall for that very reason. Everyone carried on. Before Kurt could marvel at this, his phone rang. He pulled it out and read the text. "Hey Kurt, you at Dalton? What you up to? M." Kurt smiled and quickly replied, "Thinking of boarding. K." "So you'll only be around on weekends?" M. Kurt felt a twinge. He'd seen the look on Mercedes' face when he'd announced his intention to leave. She was the first person who he should have talked to about it, and in the end she'd been one of the last. Even he had to admit that after all he and Mercedes had been through together, she deserved more than a last-minute announcement without even consulting her prior to his decision. "Sorry, Em. I just thought it would help Dad and Carol if I stopped commuting so much. K." "I get that. Don't worry about it. M. You know I'll be over in a heartbeat if you need me, right? K. Kurt, relax, we understand. And don't worry, we'll catch up everything on weekends. M." There's that "we" Kurt was dreading. It hadn't just been Mercedes, it was the whole club. He started to wonder what they were doing now. It was lunchtime, so they must be in the cafeteria, or maybe even in the music room rehearsing for whatever performance Mr. Schuster had planned for them. Mike, Tina, and Mercedes would be dancing, to what Puck might be playing on the guitar, and Artie might be trying to explain to Brittany that facials were not things done by fascists. Santana and Quinn might be discussing some madness by Kurt Sylvester, while Sam kept his arm around Quinn. Rachel would be baffling Finn by obsessing about rehearsals, and since Kurt was no longer around, she might well be taking the solo that should supposedly have been for him, if he hadn't left. "Kurt?" He looked up and saw the other three staring at him in concern. He blinked. "What?" Wes glanced at Blaine, who had been trying to catch Kurt's attention twice, and only now had succeeded. As he expected, Blaine looked apprehensive. "Is everything all right?" "Yeah," Kurt breathed, shoving his phone back into his pocket. "It's fine. Why?" David raised an eyebrow and glanced sideways at Wes. Wes looked back and then looked at Blaine. Blaine kept his eyes on Kurt as he moved forward. "You sure?" he asked. "Yeah," Kurt nodded and smiled for good measure. The problem with having so much in common with Kurt was knowing when he wasn't telling the whole story. But for now, Blaine decided to overlook this and grabbed Kurt's hand with a dazzling smile. "Come on, I'll show you the rooms." Kurt, blindsided by the grin, could do no more than smile and follow him up the hand-carved staircase. David and Wes looked at each other and just shook their heads with a laugh. "I seriously wish they'd get a move on," David complained, loosening his tie. "If I hear Blaine pine over him one more time—" "I don't know, the last time Blaine had a crush on someone, it took him 2 months to actually say something to him," Wes said doubtfully. "Let's not talk about that. It pains me to remember what we had to go through." David winced. "I remember when he heard this song and decided it was perfect for that situation, and it was the only thing playing in his room for a week. I avoided his room like the plague. I actually had to live with that. We shared a room, Wes. We shared a room. I kept earmuffs next to my bed. And yet here we are again." Wes sighed, waving to the stairs where Kurt and Blaine had disappeared. David made the same long-suffering sigh. What we do for the sake of friendship. Kurt was pretty sure that Blaine went this way down the halls, but after the older boy had let go of his hand for a moment to talk to a warbler in one of the rooms, he found himself lost. Surely he couldn't be that hopeless at navigation, but Windsor's corridors not only looked identical, but they were very similar on every floor. Kurt wandered around for a moment, staring at the art that hung on the walls, the furnishings, the fact that the floors were carpeted, and the wood furniture looked as though antique dealers would have heart attacks upon seeing it. And now he had no idea where he was. And he had the feeling he was being watched. Now I remember that thing I told Kurt Sylvester about feeling like I'm in a horror movie. Kurt glanced around surreptitiously. He thought he had heard movement behind him, but there was nothing there when he looked. He nearly jumped out of his skin when he turned back and found that a blonde boy was standing there with a Cheshire Cat grin. "Hello, Alice," he said, ice blue eyes sparkling. "Pardon?" Kurt stared. "Welcome to Warblerland," spoke an identical voice behind him. He quickly turned and found the same boy with the same grin, standing the same way. Or, at least, that was what it looked like. Okay. Kurt stared back and forth at the two of them. The twin behind him made one smooth step with his long leg, and was now standing next to his brother. The pair of handsome twins were grinning. "You look lost, Alice," said one. "Did you fall down the rabbit hole and hit your head?" "Because if you're lost, we can point you the right way," said the other. Kurt decided that even Brittany's hallucinations might have made more sense than this, but he shook it off and just flashed them a rather nervous grin. "I'm Kurt. I'm—" "New," the twins chorused. "We know." "And you are—" The twin on the left raised a hand. "I'm Ethan." "I'm Ellen," said the other twin. And in unison, they each grabbed one of Kurt's hands. "Come on, Alice," they chorused. "We'll give you orientation." Not really having the strength to protest, and not being able to hold back the twin dynamos that were currently pulling at his arms with enough force to amputate, Kurt flustered. "Actually, I was here with Blaine." "Blaine? We know where he is. He's downstairs. He's looking for you. He won't mind if we borrow you for a bit." And Kurt was unceremoniously swept into a Windsor room for the first time. The hallways only partially prepared him for what a room in Dalton actually looked like. It was like stepping into the set of the Tudors. It didn't look like much from the outside, but inside was the size of a large apartment, with no walls to separate the common area from the beds. There was a central area where comfortable furniture lay. In the twins' case, there was a lush white couch, a glass coffee table with a large television screen. The coffee table was occupied by some massive Nerf guns that looked out of place amidst thick school books. Beyond this living area were the beds, one on each side of the room, each standing on a wooden dais that served to separate it from the common area. The beds were well-kept antique four-posters with sheer drapes. One bed was made, the other was not, but it had school clothes all over it. There was a third dais, directly across from the doors, that could serve to hold another bed, but in this case, it just served as an extension of the common area. "Okay," said one twin, probably Evan, flopping Kurt down unceremoniously onto the sinfully luxurious white couch in the common area. "This is what a Windsor room looks like." "Actually, it's what every room looks like," said the one who was probably Ethan. "We've seen the others, but Windsor is still the best, of course." I don't mean to be rude, but could you guys possibly talk in one straight go at a time?" Kurt asked, confused. Ethan laughed. "Blaine says it helps if you just think of us as one person. If you're new, that is. You'll get used to it." "Thank you," Kurt grinned. Evan continued. "Here at Windsor,